Pyramid of pain. We're at the top, right? We're at the toughest level for the adversary to overcome, right? Tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? So this is really about understanding how the adversary goes about accomplishing their mission, right? The goal here would be identifying things all the way from reconnaissance to data exfiltration, and then everything that's in between, right? Truly understanding your adversary, right? And the behaviors that they're going to leverage. So when we look at things like persistence, what technique are they using, right? And the goal as a defender is to make sure that we minimize their ability to fully execute their tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? And again, I've said this, in previous videos, as you're climbing the ladder or climbing the pyramid, the more layers you make it hard for the adversary to overcome, most likely they're going to keep what they built and not trying to continue to make changes to their capabilities. They're just going to move on maybe to another victim. Now, that doesn't mean that if they're not dedicated or persistent, that they're not going to continue to work to overcome the defensive capabilities that you might have. And again, the goal here is, you might need a detection capability to let you know that you are being targeted. So when we look at detections, we've got endpoint, umbrella, tetration, firepower, email, web, threat grid, and stealth watch. And then preventative capabilities, we've got endpoint, umbrella, tetration, firepower, and web. All right, so let's dig into this. And some of these technologies actually have the MITRE ATT&CK reference built into the product, right? So you can actually reference, maybe the tactic and technique that actually is being used. So Stealth Watch and Cognitive, we round this out with detection capabilities. It can help identify tactics such as exfiltration, right? As well as a technique such as data encrypted and or exfiltration over a C2 channel. I've also included links here. I'll go back and put these in the video notes as well around MITRE ATT&CK or Cisco security and MITRE ATT&CK mitigation mappings. It's a pretty decent document where Cisco's went out and mapped where we might be able to mitigate certain techniques as well. Obviously, intelligence gained here can be leveraged in other preventative platforms. Endpoint AMP, so Cisco Endpoint AMP also determines cloud indications of compromise, so cloud-based IOCs based on multiple events or sequences of events observed on an endpoint within a certain time period. The purpose of cloud-based IOCs is to act as a notification of suspicious or malicious activity on an endpoint. A cloud IOC triggers on a host obviously would need to be investigated further to determine the exact nature and the source of suspicious activity outlined in the IOC description, right? And so you've got here an example, right? So osx.doc.ioc. So this includes MITRE ATT&CK tactics. So there's command and control, collection, persistence, credential access, endpoint AMP provides mitigating controls because it has your AV, advanced malware protection as well. Details around the MITRE ATT&CK mapping to the Cisco security portfolio are included in that PDF. Endpoint AMP has direct references to MITRE ATT&CK within the console, providing immediate insight into tactics and techniques used by the adversary. Again, so intelligence gained here can be used in preventative platforms. So again, you can mitigate some of the threats with Endpoint AMP as well, right? But there's certainly a large part of detection capabilities as well. Firepower, there's both detection and prevention. So firepower can help identify and mitigate the tactics such as discovery, right? And the technique such as network service scanning, right? Cisco security matrix, MITRE matrix mapping can be found here. Email security can help identify and mitigate the tactics, such as initial access, right? So that's the tactic. The technique is spear phishing link, right? And or spear phishing attachment. So Cisco security and MITRE attack mitigation mappings can be found at that link as well. So I think every one of the products has a mapping. Every one of them do have a mapping to MITRE, at least on this PDF, right? Some, like I said, the Endpoint app has actual references of MITRE within the console itself. So we'll actually tell you that it was, maybe the tactic was command and control, right? And what technique was actually being used. Web and cognitive, the WSA can help identify and mitigate the tactics such as initial access, the technique such as drive-by compromise, right? That's what, proxies have the ability to do, right? And so there's some mitigating controls as well, and I call these out. So this M1020 that you see in brackets here is actually referenced in the Cisco security / MITRE mitigation mapping document. And this talks around obviously SSL or TLS inspection, right? And that's something you can do with, say, Firepower, right? Obviously, you can do TLS inspection there as well. Obviously, any intelligence you gain here can be used in any type of preventative platform that you might have. Umbrella, Cisco Umbrella helps identify and mitigate tactics such as initial access. So you see this is similar to the one before. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. I would spend hours if I was actually going to do that. But it also, spear phishing link, it can mitigate against that, right? Based on domain as an example. Or if you have the proxy functionality, that would also help mitigate that risk here as well. Obviously, there's mitigating controls. One's called out specifically: restrict web-based content. Details around that is included in the Cisco Security and MITRE attack mitigation mapping document. Intelligence gained here can be used in preventative platforms. I know I'm regurgitating that a lot. I could have probably summarized that at the very end. But I want to make sure if you only watch the umbrella portion of this, that you understand that there is the ability to even if it was only a detective capability, the information that you gain here could be tremendously valuable in preventing that attack. Threat Grid has the ability to analyze files and calculate hashes to determine behaviors. Threat Grid can also analyze URLs, right? We've talked about that in previous videos. This includes identifying TTPs, right? So Threat Grid can help identify the tactics such as privilege escalation and techniques such as process injection. So Threat Grid has direct references to the MITRE attack framework within the console, providing immediate insight into the tactics and techniques used by the adversary. So that's kind of cool, right? I've already called that out. Endpoint has that capability. Threat Grid has that capability built into the platform as well. Threat Grid is detection, right? Although there's information that could be fed into other platforms to be able to provide preventative capabilities. If it's Cisco Security as an example, it could be automated. Or other third-party security technologies could leverage an API. Tetration. So Tetration collects and baselines the process details running on each of the servers. This information includes process ID, process parameters, the user associated with it, process time, process hash. Tetration can help identify and mitigate tactics such as execution and or defense evasion, and techniques such as signed binary proxy execution, registry simprovider.exe. Tetration provides mitigating controls such as protection against behavior prevention on endpoint. So this is that M1040 that's included in that matrix mapping. And then there's also an audit functionality as an example as well. Also, Tetration has direct references to the MITRE attack framework as well within the console, providing immediate insight to the tactics and techniques used by the adversary. So that's kind of cool as well. Intelligence gained here obviously can be fed into other preventative platforms. Now, that's the end, at least from the pyramid of pain perspective, of where the detection and preventative capabilities come into play, right? And so hopefully I've justified why I think Cisco Security Technologies aligned and how they meet, either a detective or preventative capability for each of the indicators outlined in the pyramid of pain. This is not an exhaustive example of all the capabilities, right? Again, I could be here, for hours walking through a single product and all its capabilities for a specific indicator. I tried to highlight the most important ones, or the maybe not so obvious ones, but ones that I thought were relevant enough to prove the point that the capability exists, but also provide guidance to you as you're trying to hunt down that adversary. Now, the challenge as a defender or a responder is how many consoles do you have to go into? How many different products? How do you feed in the preventative capability? That'll talk a little bit more around Cisco Threat Response and SecureX in regards to how one might be able to automate some of this.